up, everyone? Welcome to the 98th episode of the Boundless Business Podcast. Today we got the amazing Justine, Larissa, and Nico here. Team, how are we doing today?
We're
I'm
thriving.
good. Yeah.
Right? So it's pretty good. Pretty good. We're shooting this on a Tuesday, so it's a little funky because it kind of feels like Friday when we usually shoot them. But we in this. So, with that being said, Justine, what's going on? What's the topic today?
Today we're going to talk about some different ways that advertisers, people that might be trying out ads for the first time on their own, can deal with ad fatigue, and also ways that we personally combat this in us running ads for other people. Different ways that we kind of prevent ad fatigue and help it when it does happen. So let's start with what is ad fatigue. What do we mean when we say ad fatigue?
Yeah, so we've probably all seen, if you think back to especially like your childhood, because there were so many like simpler ads back then, but there's always a jingle or an ad that you saw and you're like, oh, this is for Coca-Cola, or this is for a specific log group, or the DJs on the radio always like saying something. And after a while, it becomes almost second nature to even hear a slight bit of it and then tone it out. You really forget the messaging in there. Now, there's a certain point where it becomes nostalgia, and like you think back fondly about that. But usually, for most people, they don't run something for 50, 60 years, so they don't have time for that nostalgia to build. Ad fatigue happens when the users, customers, leads, prospects, people see your ad or hear your ad and instantly start dismissing it because they've seen it or heard it before. So ad fatigue is when your ad becomes fatigue, when your advertising it becomes less effective because it's been seen too many times by the same amount of people.
So
And
the
why
other
should we?
scenario,
Wait,
oh, sorry, Justine. The
no,
other
you're good.
scenario that ad fatigue can happen is not necessarily that it's been shown to the same group of people too often. However, sometimes ads can be considered fatigued if the algorithms behind them have not been, like, feel that they haven't been able to get them where they need to go. You'll see that a lot of times, for example, a lot of ads will have a learning phase and then they become fatigued because it could never learn who to target. And that's going to be more specific to like digital ad platforms. And it works different on each one, but keep in mind, fatigue could basically be like an ad could be fatigued because it just never caught steam, or to Nico's point earlier, it's just been seen too many times.
Gotcha. And so people should care about this because their ads they're no longer being effective. They're not getting as many leads as our goal is.
Yeah,
So
and the
what are some
cost
ways?
just go through the roof. So
Yeah,
less leads, higher cost, which is the opposite. You want more leads for lower cost.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so what are some ways that we deal with ad fatigue here?
Well, it really starts with how you set up these ads. So Larissa brought up a perfect thing, which is you might not be spending enough money in the beginning to reach the threshold that every platform, whether it's Facebook, TikTok, Google, whatever that is, needs to get past their initial phase of learning or learning phase. So in the beginning, it might be how your campaigns are set up. So it might not reach enough people within a 3, 7, 10-day window for the ad to know who to target. So that's the first thing. That's how you kind of prevent it. Now, without knowing your industry, specifically if you're in the outdoor landscaping industry, costs vary so much between leads for pools versus leads for artificial grass versus lighting versus even windows. If you think more home exterior, it varies all across the board. So you might not be spending enough. The second is you might only have one or two images or pieces of content or videos where you're not giving the platforms enough content to test, because really what it does is it takes that ad, sprinkles it in front of some people that it thinks might be a good fit for it. And if you only have like one image, the targeting might be awesome, you might be spending enough, but the image just might not be hitting home with that specific niche. And the same for video, right? So you might not have enough creatives. You might be targeting it too specific. So you might be putting too many parameters on that specific person or niche that you want to target. And again, you're restricting the platform too much and not letting it learn. Those are the three big ones that we see across the board. Larissa, what do you think? What am I missing?
I don't know that you're necessarily missing anything in terms of the setup. But, you know, one of the other things that we've said many, many times, sometimes you think your ads are fatigued, but they're not. And sometimes you also have to like keep a close eye on it just to make sure that an ad might be fatigued, but if your costs and your lead rate or whatever the result you're looking for, whether that's page views or whatever, um, those, if they are still good and the ad is fatigued and it says fatigued, it might be okay to keep it running. Just keep that in mind. But one of
Take
the
it with a
biggest
grain of
things
salt.
is time, right? So making sure you have enough time for your ads to be successful as well. And that kind of goes into the next piece of like, well, you wanted to have enough time, but one of the first things that you might consider doing if your ads aren't performing well because they're fatigued is you might consider rotating your ad creatives and trying out new creatives or maybe even retrying old winners. There's a bunch of different things you could do there. But that would probably be first the first or a first way you would start to combat the ad fatigue itself.
Yeah, and really, like, it's important to watch and have enough historical data, and that's why it's good to work with a marketing partner. So because usually they have gone through it. Like with us, we know that even if it says fatigue on the platform, if you're still getting the lead cost at where you need it to be, everything is still okay. Now you want to start prepping for it to eventually not be okay because depending on how much money you're spending and your lifetime uh, uh, reach and the time that you've had allocated to this specific campaign, uh, that could end any day, or it could last for months depending on how the algorithms pick it up. So it really just depends on how the platforms behave and how that might impact your goals, right? So just keep that in mind because again, you don't want to change something if it's working really well.
How important is like testing one ad against another?
Incredibly important. I mean, you have to have a lot of ads testing against each other. However, the way I would like restructure that, or I guess, we can all collectively maybe think about it, is it's not necessarily testing 1v1. You're not trying to see is it A or B a lot of times. Sometimes you're trying to see like maybe you have like 5 or 6 different options that as long as you have the budget to be able to support like accurate testing behind each one, you could be testing all of them against each other simultaneously. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one test. So to that point, I would definitely keep in mind it's also not like a one image to one image. Oftentimes you'll have under, let's say, a single image, 5 or 6 different text options and whatnot. So then we start doing the math on how many times that actually is, and then you're like, oh no, that's actually 30 different tests if we're doing, 6 different images for 5 different pictures and comparing them all against each other. We're doing a lot of micro tests simultaneously to see what's going to perform better. We may be testing larger trends, but realistically, we're trying to find the combination. And so a lot of times if your ad's fatigued, it's because you didn't find the combination with the audience. Ultimately, like that's what that means. So when testing new ones, try to find those bigger themes. But again, you'll be testing 30 different things against each other,
Yeah.
assuming you have the budget.
Yeah, it all goes back to testing. So, in future podcasts, we'll go more in depth with like how to set up ads and target and ads. But this is one of those that like if things have gone really well and you're starting to see less leads or worse quality or higher cost, then your ads might be it might be time for a refresh. Now we've seen ads go as long as like 3-4 months. We've seen ones that just after like a week they're just done. So just definitely keep it in mind. So many factors go into it: timing, niche, offer, money spent, time. Like there's so many factors that go into it. So if you have any additional questions, email me at nico@boundlessmedia.com and we're more than happy to help you out.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, do you have any advice for people who are super intimidated by this? Like, what is your biggest piece of advice for people who are so scared of running ads just for them to fatigue and die?
It's part of the natural process, right? If you plant a tree, you know that there's gonna, going from like planting to the actual, tree, there's so many variables that go into it. So even when something goes wrong, just know that like if someone else in your industry has done this before, or they've worked with someone that has helped them, that it can work for you as well. So um, we're not building rocket ships to the moon. We're advertising our landscaping construction businesses. So if someone has ever done it, then there's a high degree of possibility that it'll probably work for you. Might not work the first time or second or fifth or 20th, but it will work.
Well, is there anything else that you guys wanted to add before we close it off?
Sorry,
I don't think
advertising.
so.
Get ready for the new year. New year starts right now. So we want to make sure that we're starting and prepping and building for next year. So if you guys have any additional questions, again, emails nico@getbalancemedia.com. We'll see you guys later on the next episode. Getting close to that 100. Peace.